Hi, kiddos. We're going to read chapter 5 today. Here we go. The next day it rained. The day after that, it rained again. By the fourth day of unrelenting rain, I was tired of reading, tired of sketching, and tired of myself. I missed the girls in the orphanage and devoted hours to writing to each of them, describing in detail my tedious life at Crutchfield Hall. I wrote to Miss Beatty as well, but not to Miss Medlicote, who would most likely answer with a long letter reprimanding me for being an ungrateful girl who complained when fortune smiled upon her. It occurred to me that I was indeed ungrateful. Compared to what I'd endured at Miss Medlicote's establishment, I had nothing to complain of. I had no chores. I had books to read. I never went to bed hungry. A little boredom was nothing to complain about. Thrusting my letters into the fire, I watched them burn. Later, I'd try writing again to my former companions, but feared it might be a difficult task. If I didn't complain, they might think I was bragging. If I complained, they might think I had forgotten what I'd escaped by leaving the orphanage. I'd finished Great Expectations the night before, so I decided to go downstairs and look for something else to read. After some thought, I selected Vanity Fair from the shelves in the sitting room. I'd heard Becky Sharp was a wicked girl, and I thought I'd enjoy reading about someone worse than myself. On my way to the stairs, I passed my uncle's study. The door was open, and I decided to have a look. His books were dull, having to do with law and history, and collections of essays by men such as Carlyle and Macaulay. His papers consisted of deeds and other legal matters, some of them quite old and brittle and written in Latin. Uncle had a large globe on a stand. I spun it round and round and stopped it with my finger. I pretended to be in the place my finger landed. First, I was lost at sea in the Pacific Ocean, a female Robinson Crusoe in search of a desert island. Then it was on to Africa, where I explored jungles and escaped from lions. In America, I traveled in a stagecoach pursued by Indians. At the North Pole, I nearly perished in the cold, but was rescued by Eskimos. Tiring of that, I made up stories about the portraits hanging on the walls: long-nosed ladies with small chins and close-set eyes, red-faced gentlemen with round cheeks and bushy whiskers, handsome young men with curly hair and dimples in their chins, pretty girls with rosy lips and cheeks. I imagined them riding horses and dancing at balls, falling in love, marrying, living to be old, or dying tragically young. I had no idea who the subjects actually were, or what had become of them, or even if they were my ancestors or someone else's. All I knew was that they had been painted a long time ago. When I'd run out of stories, I examined the things on my uncle's desk. I nearly cut myself on a fancy letter opener. I spun a revolving stand filled with pipes of many shapes and sizes. I examined the pictures of tobacco tins, and then I spotted an oval picture of a boy and a girl. Judging by the style of their clothes, the children could have been photographed yesterday. The girl was about my age and very pretty. Her hair was long and dark and curly like mine, tied back with a ribbon the same way I wore mine. The boy was several years younger, about 9, I guessed. His hair was a mop of dark curls, but his face was rounder than the girl's and his expression sweeter. Sophia and James, I thought. They had to be. To get a better look, I took the picture to the window. Sophia had my straight nose and oval face, but she had Aunt's narrow-lipped mouth, and the expression on her face was sulky. She stood stiffly, as if she didn't want to be closer than necessary to her brother. My musing was interrupted by Aunt's voice. "What are you doing in here? You have no business touching the things on your uncle's desk. Put that down." I was so startled, I dropped the photograph. The glass in the frame broke with a sharp snap. As I stooped to pick it up, I pricked my finger on a sliver. Horrified, I watched a drop of blood fall on Sophia's face. So that's got to be what she's talking about right now, right? Aunt snatched the picture. Look what you've done. The photograph is ruined. Sorry, Aunt. As I spoke, I wrapped my handkerchief around my finger to stop the bleeding. I didn't mean. With an angry look, she interrupted me. Your uncle will be quite upset when he sees this. I will speak to him as soon as he returns from town. Photograph in hand, my aunt wheeled about to leave the study. I hurried after her. Please, Aunt, I cried. I'm sorry, truly sorry. Go to your room, she said, and do not come down for supper. Nellie will bring your meals. But, Aunt, she turned a cold and angry face to me. Go to your room immediately, or I shall see that you stay there until I find a suitable boarding school for you. Left alone in the room, I listened to my aunt's footsteps fade away. I wanted to ask her if the girl was Sophia, if the boy was James, but she'd given me no opportunity. As usual, I defended her. Worse yet, she threatened to send me to boarding school. Despite my aunt's kindness, I did not want to leave Crutchfield Hall. Boarding school might be no better than Miss Medlicote's establishment. Evening was coming on fast. In the silence, the room grew colder and darker. A draft stirred the air around me. For a moment, I felt something like the touch of a cold hand on my cheek. Certain that I was being watched, I moved closer to the fire. When Nellie brought my supper, I was still huddled by the hearth, brooding on Aunt's conduct toward me. I'm sorry Miss Crutchfield was so angry with you, Nellie said. She has a wicked temper. I see it myself when I do wrong. It's not just her temper, Nellie. She hates me. Nellie fidgeted with her apron. She seemed to want to tell me something, but wasn't sure she should. Finally, she said, Ye must never tell Dawson this, but her says it's account of Miss Sophia, that your aunt hates ye so. Your aunt thinks Mr. Crutchfield brung ye here to take Miss Sophia's place, and her doesn't want ye. Her wants Miss Sophia, nobody else, just her. But Nellie, how can that be? Sophia is dead. Aunt can't bring her back. Dawson says Miss Crutchfield be daft. Nellie tapped the side of her head. I didn't know what to say. I was so accustomed to Miss Medlicote's behavior, I'd assumed Aunt was of a similar disposition. Mean-spirited and cross, but not crazy. It's on account of Miss Sophia that there be so few servants, Nellie went on. Folk from the village are scared to work here. Some even say Crutchfield Hall be haunted. Here Nellie's eyes widened and her voice dropped. Do ye ever feel someone a-watching ye? Sometimes. The room was quiet and hushed. They say it be Miss Sophia, Nellie whispered. They say she won't lie quiet in her grave. Suddenly, Nellie hid her head under her apron like a child hiding under the blankets. Oh, Lord, I be a-scaring meself, she cried. I can't bear thinking on spirits, miss. It's only the wicked what comes back. The good stays in the ground and waits for the Lord's call on Judgment Day. Equally scared, I patted Nellie's shaking shoulders. Never given much thought to ghosts before. Just getting through each day at the orphanage had taken all my energy. But now, in this dark house, with time to spare, the spirit world seemed very real. Maybe even dangerous. At last Nellie emerged from her apron, her face blotchy with tears. Oh, miss, I pray there be no ghosts here. With that, she jumped up and headed for the door. Dawson must be a-wondering where I am at. There be work to do afore I goes to bed. No longer hungry for my supper, I went upstairs to my room. There, I undressed quickly and climbed into bed. With the covers snug around me, I felt warmer and safer. I planned to read Vanity Fair till I was too sleepy to make sense of the story, and then I'd just go to sleep. Just as I'd gotten comfortable, I heard a knock on my door. It was Uncle, come to say goodnight. Oh, I hear my sister was quite cross with you this afternoon, he said. Yes, I bit my thumbnail and looked at him sadly. I'm very sorry I broke the glass on the frame, Uncle. I hope I didn't ruin the photograph. Oh, don't worry, Florence. The picture is fine. All it needs is a new piece of glass. He reached for my hand and looked at my finger. Did you wash the cut? Yes, Uncle. It was just a nick. He hesitated, taking a moment to smooth my blankets and adjust the lamp's wick before he crossed the room to the fireplace. The picture was taken almost a year ago, shortly before Sophia died. I sat up straight and stared at Uncle. How did she die? He stirred the fire with a poker. The blue flames leapt a little higher and made shadows dance on the wall. Oh, Sophia had a bad fall, he said in a low voice. She and James were playing together when it happened. Giving the fire another poke, Uncle said, Sometimes I fear the boy wants nothing more than to die himself. It's as if he believes his death will atone for hers. We sat together and watched the fire. The wind tugged and pried at the windows, making the curtains sway. After a while, Uncle got to his feet. He leaned down to kiss me goodnight. I found the nerve to ask him one last question. What was Sophia like? Sophia. Uncle spoke her name as if it were a long, soft sigh, a winter wind in the treetops, a drift of snow, a wash of water over stones. It's hard to say what Sophia was like. She was a difficult child, quick to anger and long to sulk. She was quiet and secretive, not always truthful, and often unkind to James. I looked at Uncle puzzled. But Aunt adored her. Yes, she spoiled her with pretty dresses and dolls, never scolded her, never found fault, never made her behave. Unfortunately, Sophia did not return her aunt's affection. Indeed, she took advantage of my sister. I seized Uncle's hand. Do you believe in ghosts? No, indeed, he chuckled. Why do you ask? People in the village think Crutchfield Hall is haunted. Did you know that? Uncle laughed. Ho, ho, ho. The villagers are a superstitious lot. Pay their stories no heed, Florence. He looked at me closely. You're not frightened, are you? Sometimes I think Sophia is still here, I said quietly. I feel her following me, watching me, listening to me. Wherever I go, she's nearby. Uncle looked at me earnestly, his kind face filled with concern. Oh, my dear foolish child, that's quite impossible. When we die, we leave this world and do not return. Be a sensible girl. He handed me Vanity Fair. Read your Thackeray. You'll find no ghosts in his stories, just ordinary people like you and me and 1,000 others going about the world as we must. Uncle sat with me for a while, trying to calm me. I was too imaginative. I was too sensitive. I was alone too much, he said. Because I wanted to please him, I did my best to dismiss my fears as silly and childish. After he left, I listened to his footsteps until I heard them no more. Let Uncle believe what he liked, but I knew Sophia was in this house. I hadn't imagined the laughter, and the voice in the garden, or the cold hand on my cheek. Sophia was watching me, and I didn't know if I should fear her or try to befriend her. All right, that's the end of chapter 5. Go write me a response. I want to know what you think right now.